If you have a loop that's cool for about 30 seconds and then starts to drag, this one's for you. I had exactly this on a song I was finishing, an 808 that looped the whole track and slowly bored me to death. So here are 3 ways I added variety to it. And these 3 ways can be applied to any kind of loop, whether it be a synth, a guitar, drum loop, whatever. The project on screen is going to be the 3rd track of an upcoming album, and I've spent months picking through and negotiating all the little details across the song. And again, every time I listened to the song from top to tail, by the time it got to the 2nd verse here, I was completely bored. And there's plenty of variation through the song, but if I zoom in on the 808 and you look closely, the bass just plays the same pattern again and again. So I'm going to play for you the second half of the 2nd verse without the vocals so you can focus on the bass. That's the section in full, and are you feeling the drag like I am? Let me solo the bass now. Now here's the thing, I like the bass, I like the notes that we picked, I like the pattern in general, but here's how I knew the bass was a problem. I'm one of the 2 guys who wrote this song. And by verse 2, I'm checked out. I just have no interest anymore in the song. And no matter what I negotiated across the rest of the performance, the synths, the drums, muting sections at different parts, I came back to that same feeling of being bored. And if I'm bored, the listener is definitely going to be bored. Just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with using a loop. The problem is when it tips from cool loop to, so that's it? And the listener feels that drag on the song, whether they know it or not. So I dug into the 808 and I reworked the performance. And landed on something that fundamentally was the same performance, but with slight variations along the way. If you take a look, if I flip between the 2 versions, version A, you see that basic performance. And we've all lived through writing a song. You land on a part that works, you loop it, you keep going, but then over time you don't realize that that part may be a little too static and not interesting enough to carry the song. Whereas with this updated bassline, there's a little more variation and you can see it through each major pass through the riff. Let me play for you a snippet of this updated line. It's an interesting change because the bass both has more going on, but it's not like the 808 is overplaying through the section. It's not like I'm playing a solo with alchemy. The first way that I introduced variation to the performance is actually the easiest way, that being introduce a new note that the original loop wasn't playing. So right before bar 27, the original note here, if I collapse the view, was playing an F sharp, so this little guy right here. But with the updated performance, it shifts to a D sharp. So not introducing a brand new note in the scale, but by shifting this note in the first pass of the riff, I've created variation between the 1st and the 3rd phrases, which were originally the same exact phrase. We see right here, F sharp, 1 and 2, and it repeats itself with F sharp 1 and 2 once again. That's super simple. It's just using the existing notes already part of the phrase, but adjusting the pattern from phrase to phrase. I like to think about phrases in terms of 4s. So we have the first phrase from bar 25 to 27, the second phrase from bar 27 to 29, the third phrase from 29 to 31, and 31 to 33 as the 4th phrase. And there's another side to this coin, this tactic of introducing a new note. In the first phrase, I used an existing note that was already part of the pattern. In the second phrase, I introduced a brand new note of C sharp. The C sharp kind of adds some tension. It almost sounds like the bass is dropping off. So if I play both for you. Right, that lowest note creates some tension that makes it more interesting to listen to. The point being with this first tactic, if you want to create subtle variation, reuse a note that already exists in your pattern. If you want to create a moment, grab a note you haven't used yet that's part of the key and scale. And if you're like me, you're not super handy with keyboard or music theory, there's a couple ways that you can take advantage of this. One is to use the scale quantize over here. So if you just set it to the key and scale of your song, you can snap notes to the scale. And the second way to create guardrails to make sure you're in the key and scale is to use the transposer MIDI effect. So you can see I'm in A sharp natural minor. And so I could set the scale here to A sharp natural minor. So it's kind of two means to the same end. I don't necessarily need to scale quantize any of these notes because I'm using transposer, but if you wanted to, you can snap the scale, and then when you plug in a note, notice I try to add a note at B, but because it's not part of the A sharp natural minor scale, Logic Pro plugged it into C. The second tactic is to adjust the rhythm of a performance to mark a section. The original performance was very spacious, so you can see it's just one note slides through the second note to the third note, which hangs, and then two more notes at the end. And just did that again and again. Now, something I didn't point out is that the first half of the verse is very chill. It's just very low key. While the second half of the verse introduces, obviously, an up-tempo hi-hat. So there's a little more energy. So I wanted the bass to lean into that increase in energy along with the hi-hat for this second half of the verse. And the way I did that was by adding short staccato bass notes that more or less punctuate or play off the kick drum. Instead of that long hang on the third note, now there's a little more going on. The bass doesn't get crazy, it just lifts the energy and fills in that space. And these are two sides of the same coin. A spacious sound feels settled, and busier feels like a lift in energy. So I'm using the rhythmic pattern of the bass to signal a change in the section. The first two tactics are really about adding this subtle sense of evolution. I'm not trying to draw the listener's attention to the low end. I just want to make sure the 808 doesn't drag the song down by being boring. But this third tactic is intended to catch the listener's attention. And that's this little gallop right before bar 29. You almost don't even hear the pitch of the 808. It's more like a kick pattern that grabs your attention. I don't want to do this constantly through the song, but I do want to occasionally grab someone's attention, have a little ear candy that brings them back. And to quickly plug in these notes, you bring up your pencil tool, and when you click, as long as you hold your mouse button down and drag to the left or to the right, you can quickly dial in the length of the note. Notice I try to plug in the 32nd note, the last one of the two, and it quantized to the 16th note. Obviously, because quantization is set to 100% strength. So I could turn strength down, try to plug it in again. But instead, to make my life easier, I'll just go up to the grid resolution here in the LCD and set it to 32nd note. All right, so the lines have adjusted in the piano roll, and I can plug in that note. And the reason this gallop exists here, right in the middle of the second half of the second verse, is because there's another shift. The hi-hats drop back down. A deliberate ear candy moment. So now check out the full changed performance. Versus what was before. I think the second version is way better. It is more enticing, at least to my ears. Music is subjective. You may not be into this sort of thing, but I think we can both agree that these changes make the bass more interesting to listen to, even on a subconscious level, which makes the song better as a whole. So that's it. 3 easy ways to add life to a loop. A new note here or there, changing the rhythm to mark a shift, and a fill when you want a moment to actually catch the ear. Now, looping is not the enemy here, because plenty of great songs ride a loop. The thing to listen for is whether the loop is evolving or just repeating. And if it's just repeating, well, give it a job. It doesn't have to just hold down the fort.